as it pertains to the modern world and era. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about men's mental health issues in the modern world, being that it is Mental Health Awareness Month for men, being that it is Pride Month, and also PTSD Awareness Month. We thought that this would be the perfect time to come together and discuss why men's mental health is often overlooked in society, what we can do about it to make that change, why, despite the fact that mental health has become more of a prominent topic and that there is more conversation around being open around mental health, that there still seems to be rising rates of self-harm and suicide in men. So I'm Donovan. I'm a content creator and I help people with social media, and I'm joined with two very special guests. So I have Tony22 here, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, what's up, guys? I'm Tony22. I am a musician, and I make a lot of music that revolves around spirituality and mental health, depression, religion, stuff of that nature. Just being yourself and going through life, really.
Awesome. And then here I have Mateo, who also goes by Teo, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Mateo. I'm just a content creator. I do LGBTQ advocacy and I just talk a lot about my journey as a trans man.
Perfect. Well, today we're going to be diving deep into all topics, all things related to mental health men's mental health awareness. And for all of the Soluna users, we actually took a poll in which we asked a very prominent question. So we're going to ask the question, is the term toxic masculinity accurate, or should we use something else? And the results came in at 33% believe that this is totally accurate and brings major ick. 15% hate it and they think it feels way too polarizing. 41% don't love it, but there might be some truth to it. And 11% have never really thought about it. When you guys see these numbers, what comes to mind when you hear the term toxic masculinity, and how prevalent do you think that it is in society today?
Mateo, I'll let you take it first.
Oh, okay. Honestly, when I hear toxic masculinity, like looking at the poll, it's kind of like making me laugh because I never really thought about how funny it sounds. But there is truth to it, though. I feel like toxic masculinity is just a way to bring awareness to men that, it's okay to be a little bit more out of the box, be a little bit more expressionate, don't hold yourself back because of what society has for the gender norms or what a man is supposed to be or carry themselves as. So I feel like I'm with the 33%. It's accurate, but it is such a ick. Like they think people like that, but reality, people want men to be a little bit more, expressionate, more vulnerable.
Do you guys think that? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I agree most with the 41% of I don't love it, but there might be some truth to it. I think the term masculinity is being used wrongly a lot of the time. So I think masculinity isn't something that just portrays men. I think women can also have masculine traits as well. And I think anybody could have masculine traits. It just depends on what type of person that person is. And I think when people are seen as being toxically masculine, it's not masculinity at all. It's actually something completely different. It's more of an insecurity or a lack of understanding of other people in their lives. Like the people in my life who I've known as like true masculine images, they're people who are strong and secure in themselves and they just want to take care of people, masculine traits being like providing, stuff like that is like, I can see my mom as someone who's masculine, and it's like people who are seen as being toxically masculine, in my mind, aren't masculine at all,
Do you guys think that there is a misunderstanding when somebody hears, like, say a male comes in and they hear that they're being, they're exhibiting toxic masculinity? Do you think that that aids the conversation when it comes to bringing equality? Do you think that helps build bridges? Or do you think that more so that most people take that as a sign of being demonized as a male? Do you think that people hear toxic masculinity and think that it applies to all men, or do you believe that most people understand that there is a difference between the two?
Well, I feel like I definitely like hearing it now. It definitely sounds not like a what's it called, like a derogatory word. Like I feel like most people take offense to it. So maybe if there's another way we can say it to where we can bring awareness without having to tear someone down per se. But yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. So with toxic masculinity, do you think that there is an element of that actually deters people away from the goal? So when I hear toxic masculinity, I understand that there is a separation between, men who are, tend to be more nurturing, tend to not fall in. I hear toxic masculinity as terms that apply to an idea that it was upheld traditionally, that actually tends to make men feel like they need to overpower or be dominant or express themselves as being better than somebody else.
Yeah.
But do you think that word oftentimes exhibits more of a reaction out of somebody than if you were to more clearly explain to them, hey, like, you're kind of talking about masculinity, we're not talking about you if you're somebody? Because something I've heard oftentimes when I'm on social media is that if you're a man and you're offended by the word toxic masculinity, then it applies to you. If it didn't apply to you, you wouldn't be offended. Do you find that statement to be true? If it doesn't apply to you, do you still think that you have a right to feel targeted? Or do you think that you should be able to just kind of take your hands off the wheel and basically have no emotion toward it?
Are you want to take this, Tony, or?
Yeah, sure. I think that's an interesting concept, honestly. Like if it applies to you, it'll offend you. And I think that that's interesting for me because I mean, I wouldn't qualify myself as a very masculine man in general, and I see that term going around a lot, and I've never personally been offended by it. I don't think I've ever um, found myself in a situation where I'm being toxically a man. And I think
Yeah,
it only becomes like that when people see a man online who is bashing somebody else for being the way that they are. I think that's the only scenario when people are calling a toxic masculine person toxic, is when you see them deliberately trying to break down somebody else. You
yeah,
wouldn't see a video of a man taking care of his daughter and chopping down a tree and then being like, "Oh, you're being toxically masculine."
yeah,
Like, no, he's just being masculine. He can just be that. But as soon as it's like a guy judging another guy for maybe wearing a dress or something, then it's like, oh, you're being toxically masculine. It's like, no, he's kind of just an ass.
I think that kind of plays into your point, Tony, when you like, because the reason I asked that question is, I think people that exhibit, what is considered toxic masculinity, it's like what you said, those traits oftentimes don't represent what it means to be masculine at all. Because the reason I wanted to ask that question, it being Pride Month, I want to bring in the LGBTQ plus component into this, is that, when a straight male who maybe isn't healed or hasn't unpacked, what these things mean, is called something that clearly doesn't represent them, like let's say that someone calls somebody gay as a negative term or something like that,
yeah.
they take massive offense to that, even if they know that it doesn't
Definitely.
apply to them. So I find it interesting that I think that goes into your point, Tony, of like men who truly are secure in themselves, they just are able to not apply that to themselves because they're not trying to prove anything, versus like men who feel like they have something to prove and they hold on to this idea of what it means to be a traditional man, they tend to be the most reactive
Mm,
when called
Yeah,
something out of their name.
yeah. And I,
yes.
I mean, to add, I feel like those men also are the ones that, obviously, it comes from their parents. They probably were the ones that weren't able to express themselves or like certain things. And so their parents is like, hey, that's not for you. Like, you can't do that. So when they see other people do that, they're like, that's not for you,
Yes.
continuing the cycle.
Absolutely. So we have some data here. In the United States, nearly 4 times as many males die of suicide than females, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Additionally, Suicide rates among males ages 15 to 24 rose 8% from 2020 to 2021. Now, despite these overwhelming numbers that display that men's mental health is a serious condition, why do you think that it is still not talked about nearly enough? Why do you think it's something that's still looked over, even though they're the group that is most affected by
Truthfully, I
harming
feel
themselves?
as if I do think it's gonna take a while because when you look at, for example, when you look at woman liberation, right, and you think of the times where men had to go to war and women had to stay, women fought for those the freedom that they have today, and it took a while, like it did, and I feel like when it comes to men and the community, it will take a while because we still have to um, you know, debunk the myths of being vulnerable and being, crying and being emotional. So I feel as if the reason why it's not looked at as much because when it comes to men, it's just like, you got to suck it up, you'll be okay, cool. But when we need to bring more light, we need to bring more attention so those numbers can matter because they do matter and everyone's mental health matters. So we have to figure out like how can we not make this a joke? How can we make this serious so people are paying attention to men and their mental health?
Tony, do you think that discussing men's mental health takes away, or one of the reasons that men's mental health maybe isn't discussed enough is because people might view it as taking away from the important conversation around women's rights, like by prioritizing men who are often looked at as the oppressor per se, talking about the fact that presenting them in a light where they are also victims of, what's called the patriarchy, victims of what these norms are for them. Like gender norms for either group does not help either side. But do you think that people fear that by talking and centering men's mental health issues, that we are focusing on, the people who are laying the foundation for this patriarchy, instead of discussing, the fact that women who are typically have been people who have been oppressed by the patriarchy are, they're kind of overlooked?
Right. Personally, I don't think that anyone thinks that it'll take away from anything else. I genuinely just think that it's not being brought up enough and it is treated like a joke. I think men in friend groups and stuff, I mean, you can see it in several like friend groups, men will like have like running jokes of making fun of each other, and that's their hangout time. They don't spend enough time talking about what's real, talking about what's deep, talking about what's genuinely going on in each other's lives, because they're always trying to take the attention off of seriousness and
The
treat everybody
sentimental.
as a joke. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I feel like it's our responsibility as men ourselves and having men as friends to be there for them and to bring up that conversation instead of just pretending like it doesn't exist.
Absolutely. It's kind of like what I always say, and I think something that gets lost a lot of times with like social media and the internet is that nuance exists. Like two things can be true. Like women can be unjustifiably treated due to the patriarchy, and so can men at the same time. The two do not have to be, both. It's not one or the other. They both can exist at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So from there, again, being that, bringing the LGBTQ plus side of things into this, where do you guys find that being in the LGBTQ plus community fits into the conversation? I want to turn this question to Mateo, if you're willing to share your experience in terms of, where do you feel the conversation around being in the LGBTQ plus community plays into the idea around men's mental health? I know for myself, being a gay man, I have had to change the way that I speak. I have changed the way that I walk. I have lied about different interests or things that I really enjoy to conform. And so it's kind of like in my view, when you are, in that community, oftentimes you're starting from 2 feet behind, men who were born of that gender. So, from there, like I've always had to kind of felt like I have to not only hide myself as in like maybe I just have more feminine interests, but I also have to hide my identity as it pertains to being in the LGBTQ plus community. Any thoughts on that or perspective?
I mean, yeah, I definitely can have. I can agree with that because there's times where I'm in the barber shop and I might like deepen my voice a little bit. Just so in the back of my mind, it's hard for me as a trans man to have cis men friends because I always gotta you always gotta be precautious and safe because you never know how someone can think. So in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm trans, I'm trans, I'm trans, and to them, they just think they're talking to a normal, cis man. So I feel as if though that when we like as a group just focus more on the people who actually want to change instead of the people who are the clowns or joking when it comes to the LGBTQ spaces, it's going to create that what, as you know, the DL, for them to not be DL anymore. So because that's what be the joke. You're down low, or you cheating on your woman with a man and stuff like that. So I feel as if as a trans man that when you're just being more of yourself and just forgetting about like I stopped trying to deepen my voice and I just became myself. I started wearing nails like when or like painting my nails when I go to the barber shop. I'm just like, hey, I just make sure I put LGBTQ friendly for anything that I do, as a trans man to be in those spaces. But like I said, I do think that if we just focus more on the people who are more serious, more vulnerable, more open to the change, then that's how we can start a chain reaction in our spaces.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a really good point surrounding like sometimes conforming to these standards means your safety, especially in the LGBTQ plus community. So, how much of that do you think is perceived as in, we are afraid that someone's going to hurt us versus how prevalent do you think that that is? Like and if you had to like, how much of it do you think is just anxiety and how much of it do you think is like, no, this could actually happen? Like in your experience, and I'll open the floor to both of you because I think you both offer different perspectives on this. Um, you know, how often have you seen it be prevalent where somebody who is in that community should fear for their lives or fear for their
Okay,
safety?
so I love this question. I would say out of like 100, I would say like it's like a 40%. You just got to keep it in the back of your mind just to be aware, and then the other 60%, everything is still cool and dandy. I played professional basketball with men, and as you guys know, I was assigned birth as a woman. It's completely different. And my first day at tryouts, all the men, the way that they talk was very, downgrading towards women, towards the LGBTQ community. And so I definitely was in my, what's it called, like flight or fright. So I just had to make
Mhm.
sure that, I don't come as too feminine. I'm already tiny, like I'm already short. So I'm the shortest guy there. I'm like, oh no, that gives it away. So like as the person a part of the community, I think it's more of a small percentage of you as far as being cautious, but for the most part, it's still kind of like a normal conversation or everyday thing.
Absolutely. Tony, have you ever had any experience being just around other men where, even people, even if, you aren't the person who's feeling like your safety is necessarily threatened, do you feel like you've been around people who, would justify that people in that community should be afraid, or do you find that most of the time that has not been the case?
Honestly, in my experience, it hasn't necessarily been the case from me seeing that or experiencing that often. It's usually online, which I've tried to tell a lot of people that like what happens online tends to be a lot more fake than real life. I feel like the more you interact with people in the real world, the more you'll realize like, oh, everybody doesn't hate me. Like I'm just existing and nobody really cares
Yeah,
about what's going on in my life. It's like this is real life. But on the internet, it's like everyone is gonna judge everyone for everything. I mean, there have been scenarios where I am in like a group of guys, and some of them will start making like homophobic jokes or whatever, like racist jokes. It could be any type of jokes, and I'm just like, damn, like y'all don't know if one of these people in this group is going through something like that or is hiding the fact that they're gay or something like that, and that could be offending anyone. And I just feel like that type of that type of ignorance can be damaging in groups of people for sure.
Can I add something?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, as Tony was talking, it made me think of too. As for me, since I'm a trans man, I, as one might say, fit in easier because of how I look. But being a part of the trans community, you don't have to first off take hormones to even be trans. And there's a lot of trans women, trans men that still look as their assigned birth. So that's another reason why in the trans aspect, you kind of got to move swiftly because, not everyone is going to fit in or look apart to the society. So,
I can say from my experience, and I'm sure it also depends on, where you grew up, where you live. Those kind of factors, play a role into, how much your safety is, you know, in danger. But I have found that in my experience, and I grew up in a place that would be considered to have some concerning values around, some prejudice in that area. I can say that my fear of being, hurt was much greater than the actuality of me being hurt. And similarly to you, when I first came out, I felt like I needed to like tell the heavens. And then kind of like what Tony was saying, I realized like no one really cares. Like it's just like that's just part of who you are. It's not something that defines who you are. Like it's like in my experience, it was like, okay, what else you got? I did lose a lot of friends in the beginning, but it was I think that's another hard thing is you think you're going to lose so many people around you, and when you're in a place like high school especially, or even college, where you have to be around these people all the time, like fitting in is like so important because you have to show up to the next day and see them. So if it goes bad, it can go really bad for a long period of time, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is what is the benefit of upholding these gender norms? And and any why do we know that it's harmful? We see that suicide rates for men are increasing year over year. We see that men are much more likely to commit suicide or damage themselves. So with that being said, there has to be a reason as to why we're upholding these standards, right? Like what do we get out of conforming, knowing that it's so damaging for us?
I mean, personally, I think it's just a tool of control. So everybody can be like robots alike, and a way to differentiate people. You got women do this and men do that, but in actuality, there's many different cultures, many different religions where when men do the women stuff, that's okay. And I think it's all also a part of education. A lot of people are ignorant, and the term for ignorant means to lack education of a topic. And me personally, that's when it's frustrating when people talk about the LGBTQ community or even men's mental health because people talk off of biased opinions to dispute, hate, and it don't be like actual facts or anything. So it's like, how can you talk about something, have so much hate in your heart when you don't even know the truth about it?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with what Mateo said. I think that it's just a form of control or a form of organization and labeling. I mean, humans have done it throughout all of history's label things like who was the first person to look at a tree and say, I'm going to call that a tree and call that a shrub. When in reality, it's like, at what point of evolution do you differentiate those two things? We're just calling things as we see it. And I think it becomes damaging and wrong when people are like, this is a thing that boys like, only boys can like this. This is a thing girls like, only girls can like this. Because in reality, it's like, this is a thing that most guys tend to like. This is a thing most girls tend to like, but you can do whatever you want, like that should be the real way that we teach these things to people.
I think also additionally to like, the control and, the fact that we feel like we need to label things in order to understand them. I think it is natural human behavior and desire to find community. And, when you're young, there's a few ways to find community. It can be maybe through a sport, maybe a common interest. It can be that, you come from a similar area, you have similar beliefs. You're looking for people who you can find so that you feel, strong and that you don't feel like you're open to attack, especially again, since you have to maybe this typically starts in schools where you have to be around these people. You need to know that you have a core group of people who are kind of looking out for you. And something that I find that plays into every type of community, whether it's, political parties or religion or literally anything, is that oftentimes people will adopt the values, all of the values of that group simply to stay in that group, even if when going in they maybe they believed in 70% of what that group believed in, but there was 30% of things that maybe they didn't identify with. And instead of like kind of sticking their stake in the ground and saying, I agree with you guys on most things, but this is something I don't necessarily agree with, it's much easier to say, I guess I better adopt that, or otherwise I'm going to get outcasted by this group. And then I'm over here alone duck, going through elementary school with nobody to, look through. And then that follows into middle school, high school, even college to some degree. I think we think that these things end in college, but in reality, they don't sometimes.
No, yeah. And honestly, it just sounds like a form of survival. Like people, don't just want to be themselves because they're afraid to be ostracized. Like that's kind of sounds like what it's boiling down to when you like hear you talking about it.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask something kind of personal, but a little bit lighthearted, but also I think it's an important thing to ask. Have you guys ever had an interest or a music artist or a TV show that you like to watch, a hobby, an activity that you always wanted to share or even do, but because of your fear that you wouldn't conform, you stopped yourself from doing it? So for me, it was ballet. I've always been very flexible. My sister did ballet, and her dance instructor, which was like a world renowned New York whatever, would always say, get in there, you would be so good, you'd be so amazing, like you could be professional, you could do all of this stuff. And it sounded really, really fun, but I went and did taekwondo because it was something that was more considered to be more masculine, but I still got to kind of like use my flexibility and use my body in a way that was like close enough, if that makes sense. Have you guys had any experiences like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting how relatable that is. I have this song called Safe Place, and it's about how I love stuffed animals, and I've always loved stuffed animals growing up. And me and my girlfriend have this thing where we like buy each other stuffed animals. And one day I was like, I want to make a song about this. And I made this song, and I was so hesitant on sharing it because I was like, how am I going to promote this? I'm a 25-year-old man. Like, nobody's going to be like, that's cool. They're going to be like, what the hell is this guy doing with stuffed animals? He's acting like a kid. Like, that's weird. So I was like, you know, this is something that not a lot of people are going to accept about me, but I did it anyways, because I was like, that's the message that I want to give to my fans and my people, is you can be yourself regardless of what anybody thinks about you. And I put it out there, and to this day, it's been one of my most successful songs because it's allowed so many people to come out and say, hey, this is something I'm interested in too, and I'm a grown up, and that's not something that a lot of grown ups are going to be openly, hey, this is something I do. So yeah, that was definitely a scenario for me that was like, not a lot of people are going to accept this about me, but I'm going to share this about me anyway.
Well, I'm ready to listen to that song now.
Absolutely.
How about you, Mateo?
I'm trying to think. I'm not too sure. The only thing I can really say, so as a trans man, my chest is kind of like tightening up like a man's chest in a way, but I still have like a more feminine chest. And when I go to the beach, at first I was hesitant and scared to take off my shirt and stuff. But the more into my journey, the more my wife was just comforting me and just say to be who I just be yourself. And I tend to take, my shirts off when I go to the beaches and stuff like that here in Florida. And Florida's crazy. But I do that too, and I do it online as well, just to show trans people, other trans men, like, be yourself. It's okay. Everybody, we all have different things about us, but at the end of the day, that's what makes us special. That's what makes us unique. And if you're quiet about it, you're not gonna know the next person who's thinking the same exact thing or feeling the same exact way as you. Sometimes you just got to be that step foot forward, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to be a kind of like a pioneer or something, or somebody that takes that step outside of the square box. But I commend you for doing that and for living your truth and being a beacon of light for other people to live their truth as well. I think I want to look at something really positive, because I think a lot of times these conversations tend to get to a place where they feel really exhausting, because it's like, what do we do about this? Like, why is this the reality? Like, being a man is difficult, all of those things.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, in your view, if there was a world where these things, if gender norms didn't exist, and men and women and non-binary people could exist as they exist, and Barbie doesn't have any gender association, neither do race cars, none of that. Can you imagine that world, and what does that look like to you?
You want to go to?
I'll let you take it first.
Um, I see that world. Honestly, I do see that world. Like, I see that as something that can even be something as today. But I definitely see it more like a freedom thing. I feel like a lot of people not overthink, but it's like their brains is entrapped, and they forget that we do have freedom compared to a lot of other countries. Like, there's a lot of places in Africa where, as far as being LGBTQ, it's really deemed bad. But here in America, we have more freedom, and I just feel as if we just forget that we should be exercising these things instead of thinking about what the next person thinks of it. Like we've been saying, it's just like an ongoing cycle of, we just need somebody that's just gonna step out the box. And as far as men's mental health, we need that one. It's like everyone always gravitates to the Andrew Tates or whatever. Who is going to be that opposite of Andrew Tate? Who's that man? And I do think it is possible, and it doesn't sound like a fantasy. I feel like people who think it's a fantasy or think it won't happen or is unrealistic are the ones who maybe are the jokesters, or the ones that, like, we don't need that bad faith. We need the ones who are trying to make a change in here. But I do think it's possible, and sometimes I see the world as non-binary. I think the future is non-binary. I think we're all just supposed to be here chilling for real, drinking water, eating fruits on the beach. I don't know. So yeah.
I love that. I totally agree with that. I think we're seriously just supposed to be here to chill and mind our own business. Like,
Literally.
cares what the next person is doing? I think that's genuinely the truth. Is you're saying if this was a hypothetical world, but it's like that could be it right now if you just stop caring about what other people are going to think about who you are, or what you like, or what your sexuality is, or anything. It's like it can be that today, at least here. Just like you said, we have a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunity here, where like a transgender person can run a successful business. It's like that's not something that was able to happen, a couple generations ago, and now that's something that's capable. And it's like we have a lot of opportunity today to make these things a reality, and they have been a reality for some people now.
And I totally agree. I think that, oftentimes the way that if people are talking negative, or I would say even positively, how people talk about others is a reflection of how they view themselves. So I think when people, feel the need to, find these nitpicky things to bring someone down, it often comes back to them feeling inadequate in something and needing to feel, to basically brighten their light by dimming somebody else's. And so I want to, being that being said, I think a great way to kind of wrap up this is to put something into action. How do we start creating this world? What is the first step? I think that's always the question. There's always so many great insights and so many ideas as to what this world could look like and what the problem is, but what's something that we as men in society can do right now? And so what I would like and appreciate if everybody could do, and I invite all of the people watching the live as well to do this if it applies, is to go into your phone, open your text or your Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, and text one man in your life and just tell them that you love them and that you care about them and hope that they're doing well, something to that tune. Because oftentimes, we don't always have control over what policy is happening in the White House or anywhere in the world, but we have control over our own backyard, or we can at least attempt to have a say in our own backyard. So I'm going to choose my best friend, and I'm going to write the message. And everybody can do this at the same time.
Yesterday, I had brought roses, and there's usually like 5 to 12 in them. And so I went to this plaza of Target, and I was just giving them out to men, and I'm like, here, this is for men's mental health. And I noticed a lot of them who were more confident and were more like um secure. Like you can get that vibe, I feel like, personally, from a man. And some of them were very like, oh, thank you, like this means a lot. There was one guy who was like, wow, like I was going through something and it changed my day. And but on the other hand, I did get some a little weirdos. And there's this one guy who actually didn't know I seen him. He was like walking, and then he accepted the flower, but he dropped it, but he didn't see that I seen him. And so I just, went behind him and picked it up or whatever. But you can see that even just with roses, people think that that's feminine, but it's like how as men you want a difference in the world, but when people are trying to give you what you're asking for, but it might not be how you want it, but it's still like roses are for anyone. It's just a gesture of love. You got to be more open, to, into accepting it.
I find that people like that oftentimes need those roses the most, because I find that those are the people who can't even see a world where they don't have to be that. So it's almost like they have to stay in character. So because if they break character even for a second, they're gonna fall apart from all of the baggage they've carried on for so long. So I'm glad that you shared those roses, and even if they dropped it on the floor, I think that and something that they're probably thought about for the rest of the day at least.
Yeah.
But so my message says, "Hi friend, I want you to know that you mean the world to me, and I'm here for you should you ever need anything." And to prove, I'm going to click send, and that is my little token. That's my rose for the day.
I did mine to my brother-in-law. He's a youngster, and he's not from here. He's from Dominican Republic, and so he's having that hard transition into life, an American lifestyle. So I just sent him a message and tell him that I love him, and whatever you need, I'm here. You can talk about it. That'd be the most thing, though. Sometimes it just feels as if it's like maybe it's hard for them to talk about it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we need more space. It's like what we're doing here today, just a space, a safe
Yeah.
haven.
Exactly. I feel like even if at first it's not reciprocated or received properly at first, it's just about creating that space, and whoever's open to filling it, then they're open. Other people are not going to be as accepting of it. So
And that's what we focus on.
I messaged my best friend, Jared. I just said, mental health check. Love you, bro.
I
And
love
that's,
that. It's
that's
nice
something
and simple.
yeah, that's something that me and my friend group does a lot for each other. Is literally just call and be like, hey, just checking in on your mental health. Are you depressed? Are you good? Like, how's the family? And it's like, you know, some people are gonna be all like, quit being weird. And some people are going to be like, oh my God, my day's been horrible. Thank you for asking. Let me talk to you about it. And then they'll, you know, it's just about creating.
I think planting the seed too, because even if that person shrugs it off in the beginning, you don't know how they're going to think about that the rest of their day, like when they're lying awake before they go to bed. Well, thank you guys so much for doing that. And for, I hope that inspired anybody watching to do the same. And I wanted to also thank you both, Tony and Mateo, for being here and being willing to discuss your perspective on men's mental health. And I think you're both amazing, and keep sharing the content that you do because it's incredibly important.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you guys.
Yes, it's fun.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this live, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.